Alright, so it's been a while since I've done this set of videos, and no need to prolong this any further. Let's just continue with my list of my top 100 favorite movies out there. This is part 7, number 40 to 31. Number 40. Pulp Fiction. This is my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie out there. It's just perfect on all accounts. The characters are great, the actors give it their all, especially your two leads, John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson, and the dialogue is just mesmerizing. The best part of the movie for me is when these two actors are just having conversations back and forth about nothing, really. Like, you have conversations about a Royale with cheese, foot massages. Like, it's something that shouldn't be interesting because it's just them talking about stuff that doesn't even relate to the plot, but you're just so fascinated by it, and that's really the credit to Tarantino as a writer. The only criticism I have with this movie is the one scene where Tarantino is acting in it because he's a terrible actor, and it was my real first exposure to him just freely using the N-word whenever he wanted to, and it's a trait of his that I wish he would just stop, but whatever. Still love Pulp Fiction regardless. Number 39. Iron Man. Not only was this the one that started it all in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it was also the movie with The Dark Knight that really made me love superhero movies and made me realize that they could be more than just campy fun. And I did talk about The Dark Knight a couple videos back, but the reason I love Iron Man even more is because of Robert Downey Jr. He is so pitch perfect as Tony Stark, and for being a character who at the time was second tier, they really did a damn good job of making him not only an A-list character, but also showing why he's a cool character to begin with. He has a cool redemption story, and it's funny that that redemption story should parallel Robert Downey Jr.'s career, because this movie and Tropic Thunder were the ones where he had his huge comeback and became one of the biggest actors in the world right now. All the other actors do a great job. Jeff Bridges, Gwyneth Paltrow, Terrence Howard, Clark Gregg, and the end credit stinger with Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury was one of the biggest oh shit moments in terms of comic book movies. Although I have to admit, I didn't see that scene in the theater. I saw it when it came out on DVD. But still, Iron Man, love it. Number 38. Robocop, also known as the R-rated Iron Man, because when you watch both movies back to back, they kind of follow similar beats. That's not to discredit Iron Man any less than Robocop, it's just Robocop's the better movie. It's one of those very classic 80s science fiction movies that's so much clever than it has any right to be. I mean, yeah, you do have a lot of great action, you got a bunch of great 80s one-liners, you got a lot of violence that's just unbelievably absurd for this kind of movie, even though movies like Rambo and Saving Private Ryan would top this. But it's also really smart with its social commentary. The special effects are inventive, the designs for Robocop himself and Ed 209 are fantastic, it's got a great theme song. It's just a fantastic science fiction film all around. I saw this movie right before seeing the 2014 remake, and it definitely put into perspective on why people disregard the remake and why this is a classic. Number 37. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I love A Fistful of Dollars, you heard me talk about that in a past video, but there's nothing that can beat The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly when it comes to a Western. It is the classic of classic Westerns. Ennio Morricone's score is phenomenal, the characters are great, Clint Eastwood gives a really good performance, once again as the man with no name, or Blondie as he's known as, and Eli Wallach as Tuco is just so crazy and out of his mind. He's a great parallel to Blondie, and Angel Eyes is a really good addition as well. And it's such a simple premise, but it's told in such an epic way where it feels like a grand epic film that came out at the time, similar to Lawrence of Arabia. It might be the Lawrence of Arabia of Westerns, right down to the fact that it's 3 goddamn hours long. And yeah, it might be long, it might be very long, but it's long in the way The Dark Knight or The Godfather is long, where it's just perfect the way it is. Don't touch it at all. Fistful of Dollars may have set the standard in terms of this series of films, but every movie and every piece of Western-related media, right down to Red Dead Redemption, owes a great deal of debt to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Number 36. Rocky, the true underdog story in terms of the character of Rocky and the movie itself. I know this movie is 43 years old, but anybody that looks at this and goes, oh, another boxing movie? It's really not about boxing. I mean, boxing does play an important part in the movie, but it's mostly about a lower class guy who's trying to go the extra mile and prove that he could be the very best. Like no one ever was. I had to do that, I'm sorry. But it's just such an inspiring story. Sylvester Stallone not only gives a great performance as Rocky Balboa, but he makes a really great script because he is the writer as well. And then you have a bunch of other great characters, from Adrian to Mickey to Paulie to Apollo Creed. It's just such a classic film. And if you don't tear up at the end of this movie that's just so unbelievably inspiring, then you really have no soul. Because this is one of the most phenomenal movies out there, and much like how Rocky was an underdog in his movie, this movie itself was an underdog when it came to winning Best Picture. It's terrific. Number 35. Captain America: The Winter Soldier. You know I couldn't have the first Avenger on my 100 list without the Winter Soldier close by. Well, actually pretty far off, since it's in the top 40. But this is the movie that proved that the Marvel Cinematic Universe can survive without Iron Man. And it's an infinitely better movie than the first Avenger was. And I love that movie because it's got better action, it's more intense. Unlike the first movie that was a war film, this is a spy thriller. But what really sells this movie for me is the progression of why Captain America is one of my favorite comic book characters next to Spider-Man. And it solely has to do with the fact that even though he is a man out of time, he's adjusting to this new environment for him, he does not have to completely adjust if it goes against his own beliefs. If the government's doing something that just doesn't seem right to him, he will not back down. He will not cooperate. He will fight back until he manages to make things right. And that's what's so great about the character of Steve Rogers. And Chris Evans just nails it here. This was the movie that really cemented him as nobody else could play Captain America but him. Or at least Steve Rogers, because I know in the comics Captain America is just a name attached to so many people. Regardless of that, it's great, the action's exciting, the supporting cast is fantastic, from Scarlett Johansson as Natasha Romanoff, Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, the Falcon, Sebastian Stan as Bucky, the Winter Soldier, Samuel Jackson as Nick Fury, Robert Redford. It's got a fantastic cast. I'm sure everyone has this movie in their top 3 or at least top 5 of MCU movies. It is that good. Number 34. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I could have cheated like I did with Lord of the Rings and the Back to the Future sequels and just lumped all the Harry Potter movies together, but unlike with those movies, it's easy for me to pinpoint what's the best one, and that would be Prisoner of Azkaban. It's based off the last book that was a self-contained story before the rest of them had cliffhangers, and changing directors from Chris Columbus to Alfonso Cuarón was the best decision the series ever made, even though this is the only movie he directed. Because Cuarón gives a really unique style to the series while maintaining the look that Chris Columbus established. The score by John Williams is fantastic, giving him his second Oscar nomination of the series. And the kid actors do a much better job. Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, Emma Watson. This is the first movie in the series where I really bought their friendship and they became like real people. And another thing that I love Cuarón for doing is just making this wizarding world feel so alive. There's constantly stuff happening in the background, in the foreground, little things that you might not even be paying attention to because you're focused on what's supposed to be focused on. It's just a, for lack of a better word, magical movie all around, and it's my favorite Harry Potter movie. I love Deathly Hallows Part 2, I love some of the other movies, even something like Half-Blood Prince, which I know doesn't get a whole lot of love, but there's no denying that Prisoner of Azkaban is the best one. Number 33. West Side Story. This is my favorite musical of all time, and the ultimate proof that, yeah, I do love musicals. No matter how many times I tell myself that I don't or I get annoyed by them, I just can't help it. I love West Side Story. I mean, sure, it's Romeo and Juliet. Sure, some of the dialogue might be a little outdated by today's standards, but it's still a very well-crafted film. Not just in terms of the dance choreography and the songs, which are phenomenal, and the songs obviously were taken from the original play, but the characters and the romance is believable. I'm sure in this day and age we're a little more aware of representation in films. It might be off-putting for younger audiences to see Natalie Natalie Wood play a Latina woman, but to be honest, this is the first movie I ever saw Natalie Wood in, and I just always thought that she was Hispanic. It's weird to say, but that's how much this movie left an impression on me and how good she is in the role. There is not much I could say about this movie that hasn't been said over the almost 60 years this movie has been out. It's well crafted all around in terms of music, dance choreography, acting, and the ending. Every time I've seen this movie, whether it's in a classroom or a big screen or on TV, I get emotional when the ending happens because it's just so powerful, and it really does paint a clear picture of prejudice and how it could just lead to such terrible things. And so I love West Side Story. I know that Steven Spielberg is going to be remaking West Side Story, and I'll be very curious to see what he does, but whatever happens, for better or for worse, he can't top this original classic. No way, no how. Number 32. Captain America Civil War. The newest movie that I have on this list came out in 2016, and it happens to be Civil War. This is the best of the Captain America trilogy, and again, it continues to show how strong-willed Steve Rogers is as a character, because in Winter Soldier he was going up against the US government while it was being corrupted. In this one, he is going up against his allies. The Avengers are split, and I love how, even though it's pretty much Avengers 2.5, it's still a Captain America story. It is fully dedicated to this character, but you still get a lot of great moments with the other characters. You get to see Tony Stark have a better redemption. You get the introduction to Tom Holland as Spider-Man, who's my favorite live-action Spider-Man still. And it works as a great mini origin story to T'Challa as the Black Panther. This movie does so much and never feels crowded. It never feels like it's doing too much to where nothing gets resolved. It's a fantastic movie with a really emotional final battle that has you flipping between who's right and who's wrong, and it shows that the MCU can have consequences in the end. So yeah, this is fantastic all around, and I just love it. Number 31. Predator. I've already talked about this movie in my full-fledged review from last year, but just to kind of recap, Predator is a perfect action movie. I love it better than John McTiernan's Die Hard, and it's a movie that I really believe is on par with Alien and Aliens. And what's really great about this movie is that it just keeps getting better as it goes on, where the first act of the movie feels like a standard Schwarzenegger action movie like Commando. Then the second half becomes a monster movie where all these huge, muscular, tough men are suddenly outmatched by something they can't see, and it becomes a horror movie in its own right. And then the third act of the movie is a nail-biting cat-and-mouse game between Arnold Schwarzenegger and the Predator, and there's real fear, there's mystery, it's got a whole ton of action, gore. Alan Silvestri's score is just perfect all around. It really is a sci-fi classic, just right up there with all the other 80s sci-fi classics like Aliens and Robocop. It's perfect. And there you go, those are my favorite movies from number 40 to 31. I'm going to try to make it a point to finish this series before February ends. That way I can just move on to other videos and not postpone this series any longer. But until next time, I want to hear what you guys have to say about this part of the list. If you have a top 100 list, what are your favorite movies from number 40 to 31? Let me know in the comments below, and just let me know what you think of these picks in general. And until next time, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and of course leave a comment. Don't forget to support my Patreon page, follow me on social media, and until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you, there's only one.